Madhurima Jana. She is a very dynamic professor and she is working on protein dynamics. And today she will going to talk on computational methods to analyze the driving forces of protein stability. So, with your kind permission, madam, I want to start the session and please carry on.
Yeah. Thank you, Snehanshu. Okay, so I'm just switching off my camera and then I'm sharing the slides.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, so my slide is visible to everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so at first I must say thanks to Dr. Pal. He's he's my colleague and also my very good friend. And thank you, Snehanshu, for inviting me to present talk about something which is very related to the field of computational sciences. And today I will be basically talking on the computational methods to analyze the driving forces of protein stability. And as you see the heading, so it is quite related to the, people may think it is related to the biochemistry, it may be related to the biological sciences, and also it is related to the biophysics, obviously, okay, because what we do is we are using the computational methods in chemistry and applying that, not only the computational methods in chemistry as well, the physics also, because the theory behind the computational methods, whatever we are using, that is solely coming from the mathematics and physics background. And then we, being chemists, we are applying in the field of chemistry, and the tool the systems we are taking, that is biomolecules, as per my heading of today's talk. Okay, so just before getting into the details of my talk, just let me show that what we are going to do nowadays in our laboratory. So this is the molecular simulation laboratory, where we are doing a lot of modeling of the biomacromolecules. So my interest, our interest of our research group, it belongs to not only the protein chemistry, but also we study on carbohydrate chemistry. We study on modeling of carbohydrates. We do the modeling of protein ligand. Yes.
Excuse me. Please maximize the screen, and as well as slides are not changing, madam.
Oh, I have already changed the slide, so it has not yet changed. Okay.
In slide 1 only.
Okay, so I'll share the whole screen of my computer. I mean, I'm sharing only a specific window, so let me share the computer screen. I think then the problem will be less. Okay, just I'll try and I'll ask you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
I think the whole screen is shared now. Let me open the PPT. Yeah, okay. So can you see the screen now?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. Is it fine now? I have make it full screen. Yeah, I have make it full screen. So is it okay?
Yes. Now it is fine.
Okay, fine. Okay, fine. Thanks. Okay, so this is the introduction of the molecular simulation laboratory. As I said, that we do modeling not only of the proteins, but also for the carbohydrate molecules. And then we look into the protein ligand in binding information. We work on guest host interaction studies, and also recently we have started working on the membrane dynamics. So we used to model the membrane, that all of you know that this is a very essential component of the cell, and the proteins are also interacting, and there are membrane proteins also. So I will go to the details of the proteins little later. Just to let me tell about what we are doing at present in our laboratory. So membrane dynamics also we do, and then how the membrane interacts with the small organic molecules. And then nowadays a little bit we have just started on some material simulation, just like you know that lithium ion battery electrolyte, those are very, very important. Lithium ion is a battery is now emerging field of the science, which is now replaced by several other batteries also. And we are basically working on the in developing the electrolytes, whatever we are using in the lithium ion batteries. Okay, so we can improve the electrolytes property so that the ion conductance can be improved. So we are also working to design such type of materials. So already our group has designed some of the materials, and we are now trying to explore the dynamical aspects of those materials, which we can use as an electrolyte in the future days. And also obviously those are all only the model material, and which can be explored by the experimentalists. They can synthesize in their laboratory also. And also I have worked in developing of the models in using the polarizable force field model for the carbohydrates. So all these are the work we are doing, and obviously I'm thankful to my students. I will introduce them later on. So they are the main backbone of the laboratory, obviously. Okay, so with the small introduction with the work what we are doing in the molecular simulation laboratory, I will just move to the next slide, which says the outline of the today's talk. So my slide is now visible. The change is there. Can you please confirm, anyone?
Yes, madam.
Okay, fine, thanks. Okay, so this is the outline of my today's talk. So at first, since this is a multidisciplinary FDP program, so I know that the audience will be from the diverse field. So I will be just briefly describe, although I am not a biologist. So whatever the essential things we need to know as a chemist or as a biophysicist, I'll talk about only those about the protein. So just the basics of protein, its structure and how its function, why it is important for us, why we need to study the protein dynamics and associated things. So that will be briefly mentioned here. Just a minute, I'll take the laser pointer. Okay, so then after that I will be talking about, I'll just introduce what is computational chemistry or computational biophysics, as keeping in mind that the audience are of several diverse field. And then among several theoretical techniques in computational chemistry, I will be talking about some what kind of calculations we can do by using the quantum mechanical tools, and what we can do by using the molecular mechanical tools. And then I will switch to the molecular dynamic simulation, which is a very, very essential technique for to notify the dynamics of biological macromolecules. And also I will discuss about the application of it. And then I will give a small example of how to prepare a system to do the simulation of a protein, model protein. And at last, I will be talking about the analysis of MD trajectories. In this part, in the analysis of MD trajectories part, I will show some of the results of your recent work, where my students have got some beautiful results and which have been published in some several SCI journals also. Okay, so with this, let me now move to the next slide. That is the protein's structure and function. So protein, as we know, that this is a very essential, most versatile macromolecules in the living system, and it plays obviously it plays crucial roles, crucial function in essentially in all the biological processes. Okay, so that is a basically major component of all cellular system, you can say. And what is the building blocks of protein molecules? So there are 20 amino acids, you must be knowing. So among those 20 amino acids, they sequentially make a peptide bonds, and then they give the protein structure. So before going to the protein structure, that three-dimensional structure, there are some classification of the four level of protein structure. So where although amino acids are the building blocks, now you can see in this present from this diagram, now from this snapshot, that here the amino acid residues are lying here, which basically give you the primary structure of a protein molecule. And then this molecule, this primary structures, these connected by the peptide bond, as I said, and then they are now providing the secondary structure, which consists of local packing of polypeptide chain into alpha helix as well as beta sheet. The beta sheet is not shown here, but that is also a kind of secondary structural unit of the protein molecule. Okay, and this alpha helix as well as the beta sheets, they are that closely packed. They are basically closely packed with the several amino acid molecules here by forming the hydrogen bonds. So there is hydrogen bonds between the peptide bond and the central carbon backbone. Okay, and those type of hydrogen bonds basically they are responsible for the formation of secondary structural units, say alpha helix or beta sheets. Now this secondary structural unit, this they get some specific shape, and then resulting from folding of secondary structure that determine the interaction between the side chain of the amino acid and gives rise to the tertiary three-dimensional structure of the protein. So you can see here that this is the alpha helix, which is also there present in the second tertiary structure of the protein molecule. And if the protein has both the beta sheet as well as alpha helix, both will be displayed in the tertiary structure. So tertiary structure of the protein is the most important structure, which is a three dimension, and they play important role in the biological function. Okay, and then the fourth level of protein structure is the quaternary structure. So quaternary structure, this describes the arrangement of the polypeptide chain in the multi-sub-unit arrangement. So you can see here, this is a just let me point it out here. So this is basically the tertiary structural unit, which you can see here also. This is the one of the subunit, and then like that there are another subunit here, here, and here. So all the four subunit, it is assembling and giving the quaternary structure of the protein. Okay, so this is the 4 level of protein structure, and we are interested only on the tertiary structure and the secondary structural units inside the tertiary structure, because the reason is this is the three-dimensional structure, and those are mainly important for the biological function of the protein. Okay, so next I have shown different type of proteins. There are a lot of different type of proteins are there for the living beings, as well as for the living beings means human, then even plants also, you know, everywhere. For all living beings, the cell constitutes protein. So here in a very brief, I have shown what are the different type of important proteins are there and their function. So here you can say, let us start with the hormone protein. So hormone protein, just example I have shown here, the insulin. So this protein, what it does, it controls the blood glucose level and prevent hyperglycemia for the humans. Okay, so you know that the most important role of the insulin is in the human body when it is interacting with the glucose to allow the cell to the body to use glucose as an energy. Okay, so that is the importance of the insulin as a hormone protein. Next, we can move to the storage protein. Storage protein, the example of storage protein I have shown here is ferritin. So this, what it does, that it store iron as a inside it, and it also concentrates cellular iron and protects cell from the toxic effects of the iron. Okay, so that's why it is used as a storage protein. Next, I am moving to the another protein, which is immunoglobulin protein. So this is an antibody protein. So it is produced by plasma cell. They act as critical part of immune response by specifically recognizing the binding of particular antigens, okay, such like as virus, bacteria, and so on. Okay, and next I'm moving to another example, that is hemoglobin, which is a transport protein. So this transfer oxygen from our blood from lungs to the tissues. Okay, so this is working as a oxygen transfer protein, the hemoglobin. Next, this is an example of enzyme protein. The name of the protein I have shown here is rubisco protein, RUBPCO. So this is an enzyme protein which is helpful for the carbon fixation. Okay, so this is basically important for the plants also, because for the photosynthesis, these proteins are very much essential for the plants. And then I'm moving to the next one, that is a spider silk. This is another protein when the spider is making the webs. So this protein is found in the spider webs. So this protein is an essential. It has essential. This is a potential candidate which is used for the wound healing application, and it is also used in the tissue engineering. Okay, so this protein is basically biomaterial. You can consider it as a biomaterial, just like collagen. Okay, so those are all fibers. Those are all basically biomaterials, and this can be used in the tissue engineering, biotechnology, and all this. And next, another example I have shown here, that is the receptor protein. So the example I have shown here is the rhodopsin. So rhodopsin, what it does, it is basically essential for the vision. Okay, so it helps us to visualize. So this is a receptor protein. And then another protein is contractile protein, that is actin and myosin. Actin and myosin both can be found in every type of muscle tissue. So these are the various importance of the different type of proteins and their function in the living beings. Okay, so with this slide, I must say that all of we must agree that protein is a very, very essential in our daily life, with whom basically we cannot survive. So that is the importance of the proteins in living systems. Now I will show some interesting aspects of a protein here. So this is the what I had shown here. I have taken this particularly from a paper which was written by Michael Strong, which is published in PLOS Biology. So this is where Michael Strong headed the protein. The paper was headed as protein nanomachines. Okay, so I find this one is very much interesting, since what he has quoted here, that Michael Strong, he has written some of the aspects of the Feynman's talk, which he was delivering in 1959 in some lecture which was hosted by American Physical Society in California. So what Feynman said here, that he prompted to the audience in that particular lecture that the inherent properties of biological cell, and he also mentioned that although cells are very tiny, they are very active, they manufacture various substances, they walk around, they wiggle, and they do all kind of wonderful things on a very small scale. Okay, so of course many of these wonderful things that he was referring to are a result of the activities of proteins and protein complexes within the cell. Okay, and it is also being considered that the lecture, whatever the Feynman delivered on that day, was the first talk on the nanotechnology. And therefore, later on, many scientists are working and carefully they are looking into the proteins as a machines, which was first mentioned by the Feynman in that particular lecture series. Okay, and that's why now scientists, what they agree, that the protein is a machine, that is the power of biological cells, and these machines are inherently nanoscale, ranging in width from a few nanometers to over 20 nanometers. Okay, so by this there is a term introduced, that is protein as nanomachines. Okay, and behind the nanomachine to act as a protein to act as a nanomachine, the main key factor is the substantial conformational changes of the protein. Okay, that means what I wanted to say, that conformational flexibility or conformational fluctuation, that is the that plays important role in the protein structure, which is helpful to act, which basically help the protein to act as a nanomachine and do all of the biological functions. Okay, so conformation plays important role here. Now, as I already mentioned, that the protein conformation is very important here, and already I had shown in the previous slide also that the three-dimensional conformation, that is the tertiary structure of the protein. Those are responsible for the biological activities. Those structure, three-dimensional conformation, that is known as native folded state of a protein. Okay, and now how this native folded state of a protein is being maintained. Okay, so there are obviously several type of interactions that is present within the protein molecules that help the protein molecule to be folded. Okay, so what are those interactions? Just let me show you one cartoon diagram here. So you can see here that the protein consists of helical structure. It has a sheet structure just like a beta sheet, and there are certain different type of interactions also mentioned here. That is, this is the hydrophobic interaction. There can be electrostatic interaction. There can be disulfide bond between the eligible candidate, which can form the disulfide bonds, and there can be the metal ion coordination with some certain place of the protein molecules. Okay, and obviously the hydrogen bond. Okay, so these are the very, very essential interactions that help the protein to keep its native folded form intact. And obviously, other than this type of interaction, another interaction plays very, very important role. That is the solvent protein interaction. Because we know that protein cannot survive without solvent. Okay, if you just take a protein and do keep it in the gas phase, so it will be inert. Its functionality is basically based on the solvent and specifically based on water. So water plays an important role to intact its native folded form. Okay, so that is the reason the dynamics between the protein and solvent molecules and the interaction between the protein and solvent molecule is required to study, and that is a vast field of interest for the several field of the scientists. Now, there can be, we can see also that the native folded state of a protein, it can be denatured. So what is denaturation? Denaturation is nothing but when there is an extreme environmental stress, just like a rise in temperature, rise in pH, then what happens that the three-dimensional native folded structure of the protein, it eventually denaturated and it gets the unfolded structure of the protein. That means whatever the interactions were present in the folded form, native folded form, that hydrogen bonded interaction, hydrophobic interaction, electrostatic interaction, all those are not working fully to keep the protein its native folded form intact. Okay, so there can be the loss of the native folded form. Then once the native folded form is now destructed, which is known as the denatured protein state, so those denatured states are not able to do the biological function of the protein. Okay, so it is very, very essential to keep intact the native folded state of the protein. Okay, but sometimes for the protein formulation, due to the heat and change in pH or something like that, it can be denatured. So there must be some technology we have to employ so that the folded form of the protein can be intact. Okay, now apart from the extreme environment stress, there can be other factors also which can disrupt the protein structure, that I will tell you little later. But let me just tell, if there is a disruption on the protein structure of the native folded form, then how can we basically keep the native folded form intact, although when the temperature is high or the pH is also going to change? Okay, so there are some solvent molecules, those are known as osmolytes, just for example glycerol, sugars and some amino acids. If we put those in the water solution of the protein, then this particular class of solvents, they help the protein molecule to be intact. Not only solvent, there are solute also. You can see sugars, so these are solutes. Okay, so these are known as osmolytes, whose present in the protein solution help to keep the native folded state of the protein intact. Okay, so these are also this amino acid. These are basically very, very important because they are also used for the protein formulation in pharmaceutical company. Okay, other than the extreme environment, there are some solvent which can actually destruct the protein structure. So what are those solvents? And those are known as denaturants, such as urea, guanidinium hydrochloride, and so on. Okay, so these are the solvent molecules which if they present in the protein solution, they can also denature the protein molecule. Okay, so there are two classes of solvent that there can be classified as a osmolyte, which is the protein structure maker, and another is the denaturant, which is the protein structure breaker. Okay, so our interest in our laboratory, we are basically working on both this. So we are modeling to keep the intact the protein native structure in the amino acid solution, and which is, as I already mentioned, that this is used for the protein formulation to stabilize protein in pharmaceutical company also, industry also. So we have modeled protein in amino acid solution, and we have explored what are the driving forces that the protein is based structural state intact, in particular some amino acid, but obviously not all amino acid are important in this case, only few are there. And another is our interest is also alcohols. Okay, so protein, that alcohol water binary mixture, though that is a very important binary mixture. You can see several phase transition and many things are happening in the alcohol water binary mixture. That is also very important solution. And alcohol, that is not a specific denaturant agent, but in some certain concentration it may act as a denaturant, or sometimes it may also preserve the protein structure. So alcohol's behavior is very, you can say this is very interesting when it is mixed with the water. So now, which type of alcohol? It can be there can be several type of alcohol, specifically the protein substituted fluoroalcohol. All are having different characteristics, properties. So our interest also has been to look into the protein structure and dynamics in alcohol water binary mixtures. Okay, so alcohol has the specific quality, that is the concentration dependent quality, that it can act as a protein stabilizer, and sometimes it can preserve the protein structure also. So that is the reason we are interested to look into the protein in alcohol water binary mixture. Okay, so now I will say you that the protein dynamics, what are the experimental techniques which can give you the details of the protein structure dynamics, as well as it can give the interaction of protein with its surrounding solvent molecules. As I said, the solvent molecules are very, very important to keep the native protein structure intact. Okay, so first is the X-ray and neutron scattering diffraction. So X-ray and neutron diffraction, what it does, it gives us the structural information of the protein molecule, and also it provides the spatial distribution of solvent around the biomolecules in crystal. Okay, so that is the reason. So how the solvent molecules are surrounded, how the biological macromolecules are interacting with the solvent. So those type of spatial distribution information we can get from X-ray and neutron diffraction study. Okay, the next is the NMR QENS. So NMR and QENS, these are spectroscopic study. This also provides the structure and dynamics of the solvent present near to the protein surface. It provides us the residence time of the solvent which is present near to the protein. Then we can use time resolved fluorescence spectroscopy. So what it says, it also provides us the restricted environment of solvent around the protein and several biological macromolecules. Then there is a terahertz spectroscopy, which probes large amplitude collective motions of the dynamics, and it can also provide the thickness of the solvation layer around the protein and its dynamical nature. Now, as I told, that solvent plays an important role, that is true, but it doesn't mean that the solvent which is far away from the protein is also taking part in the protein dynamics. Okay, so there are some specific region up to which the solvent is basically interacting with the protein molecules. So that the thickness of that particular solvation layer up to which the protein is interacting more closely towards the solvent can be probed by this spectroscopic technique, which is terahertz spectroscopy. Okay, and next is two-dimension IR and Raman spectroscopy. So these are the spectroscopic techniques which again says about the structure and dynamics of protein unfolding, as well as the hydrogen bond dynamics. Okay, and apart from all these experimental study, there is a powerful tool which is computer simulation technique, which provide us the microscopic properties of biomolecules and its interaction with the solvent molecules, and it can bridge the experiment with model based theory. Okay, so this is the very important and advanced field of biological chemistry and physical sciences, that is the computer simulations to probe the dynamics of the biological macromolecule and their interactions with the solvent, which is also sometimes very much difficult to prove with some certain experiment, because there are some limitation of the experiments. Obviously, we can expect that in future there will be the more upliftment of the techniques, and obviously many things we will do through the experiment which is not possible to trap from the simulation also. But nowadays there are several aspects which we cannot probe through the experimental techniques due to some limitation, which can be probed from the computer simulation study, model dependent study. Okay, so that is the important why we will do the simulation of the protein, and specifically in the solvent medium. Now I will just go into the introduction to the computational chemistry, because already what is the main system? My system is protein, and already I have described about why we are interested on protein, why solvent is very important of the protein, and what are the main interactions that are essential to keep the protein intact and to play important role. It's biological to play its biological role. Okay. So with this, now let us know that what are the tools and how to use those tools, what are the methods, how to use those methods to model the protein system and to analyze the result. Okay, so that is why there is an introduction to computational part now. So this computational or theoretical chemistry, as you can see here, I have already mentioned, this is not this is not a new field. It was early part of 20th century when the quantum mechanics was developed. From that onward, the theoretical chemistry was there. Okay, so now the term computation, so this has been added when the computers came into the theory of the to solve several chemical problems. Okay, so chemists are basically doing computation for centuries, but the field we know today as computational chemistry is the product of the digital age. Okay, so we are doing theoretical chemistry from a long time, but the interference of computers made the science as a computational science. And here you can see this is the triangle, equilateral triangle, where the each edges we can see here. One is the theory, experiment, and here you have the model dependent simulation. So all this theory, experiment, and simulation all together providing you the solution. So nowadays only experiment, only theory, or not only the simulation will provide you the solution, but on the computation will not give you the solution, but that each and everyone, when they meet the criteria, you may get the accurate solution of the particular problem. Okay, so that's why theory and computation both are equally essential as that of experiment. Okay, so just to let me show some history of computational chemistry, where we have a lot of Nobel laureates also. So first Nobel Prize in chemistry, computational chemistry, was in 1981, which was given to Ronald Hoffman and Fukui for their development of theories for concerning the course of chemical reaction. Okay, so next Nobel Prize was gone to 1998 to Walter Kohn and John A. Pople, who developed DFT, density functional theory, and computational methods in quantum chemistry. By this time, I must admit that you must be knowing about density functional theory. Walter Kohn and Pople also, already few talks were there previous to me, and I hope that you are already knowing all about it. So this is also another Nobel Prize for chemistry in 1998. And then in 2013, for the development of multi-scale models of complex chemical system, just like biomolecular system, they got the Nobel Prize, which they gave the Nobel Prize to Martin Karplus from Harvard, then Michael Levitt from Stanford, and Warshel from California, okay, so, University of Southern California. So all they got the Nobel Prize in Chemistry 2013 for the development of multi-scale model of complex chemical system, just like proteins. Okay, so that is the very important for us also. So next, I have just to describe what is the little difference between the theoretical and computational chemistry. So as the theoretical chemistry is nothing, that is basically the mathematical description of a chemistry, and computational chemistry, as I mentioned, when there is in the digital age, there is an interference of computer in the theory, and hence when we are implementing computer on it, then the branch is designated as computational chemistry. But we should not confine the within the word chemistry, because this computational world is very, very vast. This is an interdisciplinary science where people from all branches can take part, and obviously we need the help of the scientists from all the different part of the sciences, because otherwise it is very, very difficult to develop the field. Okay, so computational sciences, it is basically in an interdisciplinary science where we have the physicists, we have the computational computer science people, we have the chemistry people, we have biologists, we have the people from all around physics and all around the different type of aspects of the science and engineering background. Okay, other than that, even if you think about the development of algorithm, then who will do the development of algorithm? Obviously the chemist may not be doing so good as the mathematician or a computer science guy can do that. Okay, so this is an interdisciplinary science where we can work together for the development of the field. Okay, so now why computation? So why computation? I must not talk about the chemistry here. This is basically common for the all computational sciences field. So why computation is needed? First is we have to confirm whatever the experimental results we have got so far by doing the computation, and then we can interpret the experimental result by putting some assignment there. And also computational people can predict new results which are not possible to do by any experimental techniques so far. Okay, so we can always, it is not like that computation is for the support of the experiment, but it can give the new results which experimentalists can take for their own to explain their own findings. Okay, so we can predict new results also. And also that the new results, whatever we are providing to the experimentalists, that can be verified by the experiments. Okay, so that is the reason computational science is very, very important. Now, what are the advantages of it? So first of all, it avoids experimental difficulties. So sometimes, just excuse me. So sometimes we experimentalists, they face a lot of difficulties when they are carrying out some experiment. In the laboratory, some materials are very, very, very hazardous. Okay, so being a computational person, it is very safe for us if we can build up our own model. Okay, based on the whatever the experimental data we are having, if we can build our own model, so this type of experiment hazardous systems need not to be handled. Okay, in the real life, so you can just model them, you can predict their properties. Okay, and that is the reason it is now used by several chemical and pharmaceutical industry, because people do not want to do the experiment at first because of its vast you can say the economical thing is there, and also sometimes it is very unsafe, okay, to carry on some of the experiments, some of the reaction. Okay, so that is the reason people are now choosing to do the computation at first, get the result, get the properties, and if they feel okay, these are as per my expectation, then only I will do the experiments. Otherwise, why to spend so much of money but doing the experiment? Okay, so that is the advantages. And also, when experimentalists are doing something, they are guessing, they're getting some result, they're guessing that this could be the probable reason. But if you really wish to know that this is really the result is whatever the probable reason they are saying, that is really actually happening or not. If you develop a model and if you can visualize, then it will be very clear to the person who is sitting apart from it. Okay, so for the visualization also, it provides the advantage that people would understand that it is really the things which is happening within the molecules or within the atomic state. Okay, so these are the advantages of the computational sciences. So now I will just talk about the three particular aspects of the computational sciences. One is theory, another is model, and another is computation. So what is theory? Theory, we know, we are learning it from a long time. When we were a kid, we also used to learn theory. Now theory is nothing but it is a rule. These are the rules that postulated to govern the behavior of physical systems. Such rules are quantitative in nature and expressed in form of a mathematical equation. Okay, so that is what the theory is. Now, for example, just let us say the theory of Einstein, E equal to mc squared. Okay, so that is the revolution theory. Everyone knows. Theories can also quantitatively tested by the experiment. Now, what does it mean, the test? Test means by which the applicable range of a theory is elucidated. Okay, but many theories, there are some drawbacks, certain limitations of the theory. That suppose I'm talking about the classical mechanics, which classical mechanics is proved to, which is able to applicable for the macroscopic system, but it breaks down for the very small systems. Okay, so that is the limitation of the classical mechanics. So that is a theory. Classical mechanics is also a theory. So there is a development of quantum theory. Okay, so that is there are some limitation of the theory. So a generalized theory of everything does not exist so far. Okay, so next is the model. So what is model? The model is typically involves the deliberate introduction of simplifying approximations into a more general theory. Okay, so just to let us, so if we have a theory, we can have some approximation on those theory, and we can make the theory more general to apply it for a vast class of system. Okay, then that is known as model. Just for example, I can give an example of Bohr model. Okay, so Bohr model of atom, what it does, it is very much useful to determine the energies of quantum state of electrons in the simple hydrogen atoms, but no means it will represent the true nature of the atom. Okay, so there are certain, obviously some certain limitation of the model, but it can be used for that class of molecule very easily. Okay, so that is the model. That is what the model is. And obviously computation is the use of digital technology to solve the mathematical equation defining a particular theory or model. Okay, so this is whatever this is defining the theory or model. We are just using the computation to solve it by taking the advantages of modern digital technology. Okay, now apart from this, there exists quantitative model. So what is quantitative model? This model incorporates certain constants and they are derived wholly from the experimental data. That means they are empirically determined. Okay, so they empirically determined means already there are some some experiments were done on some particular system. We have the results of those experimental system of those experiments, and then with those experimental results, we are now making our own model which will be applicable for the vast class of the molecules of those particular systems. Okay, so now let us just assume, I will take a very small example, to define what is quantitative model. Let us think about the free energy of activation for the hydrolysis of substituted beta lactams. Now everybody, many of us will be now struggling that what is beta lactam. Okay, even I also may be confused because what is this, the beta lactam is. So just for the simplicity, I have shown you here. This is the part of the beta lactam, where essentially there are some others also. I'm not going to show you details because that is not we are not interested to look into that part. Only the free energy of activation of hydrolysis of the beta lactam. That means in beta lactam, this bond is very, very important. Okay, so this bond, if whatever you were seeing, that is the carbon and nitrogen bond. There is a breakup of this bond. Okay, this CN bond, it breaks up, and for this, whatever the free energy of activation to break this bond, that is essential to build a model for our case here. Okay, so we are just going to see that CN bond, this is breaking. Now when the bond is breaking, that means there is then when the bond is forming, there is a certain overlap of the electron cloud, and that is the reason there is a formation of CN bond. Now the bond is breaking. What does it mean? That the electron clouds are far away. That means the bond distance is raising, and hence the bond is breaking. Okay, so there is no more overlap between the electron clouds. So with the change of this bond breaking, so when that means the distance is now the CN distance, which started from 1.2 angstrom, it is now increasing. So increasing means, suppose I'm going to 1.2 to 1.3 angstrom, 1.4 angstrom, and so on. And with the change of this bond distance, we can see that the free energy of activation is also going to change. Okay, so I have the experimental result of such type of bond breaking things. Okay, so just let me show you this graph here. This circle, these are the experimentally derived free energy of activation for such type of CN bond breaking information. And you can see here in the x-axis what is happening. The CN bond length is changing. Okay, it has started from 1.2 and it is going to 1.4, and these are the experimentally derived activation energy these circles are. Okay, now I have the experimental data. I just want to build a model which will define the hydrolysis of any beta lactam of this class. Okay, so if I want to build a model for it, a very simple thing is the linear fitting of this data set. Okay, so what we will do, as we can see here, we can just linearly fit this data point. So our model will be delta G dagger equal to ARCN plus B, where RCN, this is the length of the CN bond, as this is the main part in the hydrolysis of the beta lactam. And what is A? A is the slope and B is the intercept. Okay, so I have built a very simple model where delta G equal to ARCN plus B. This is nothing but, this is a very simple linear fit equation. This equation represents a very simple model. Okay, and it might be more descriptive to refer it as a relationship than as a model, but since it is experimentally derived, because the data whatever we have got here, those are experimentally derived, and then we are fitting some small model to fit all the data, get the nature of the activation energy when the bond length is going to change for such type of hydrolysis of the beta lactams. We can generalize it as a quantitative model, although very small. Okay, so this is a very simple example of quantitative model what I have furnished here. Now, how computational model meets the experiment. Okay, so as I told you already I by this time we have the clear idea that experiments and model, how to build up those. So I have done some physical experiment and I have built up some computational model. So what I will do, I will do some post experimental data needed for the computation of the model. And here what I will do for the computation model, that there will be some pre-experimental calculation which is needed to design the experiment. Okay, so once these are done, then we have to see how my system is responding against the computational model and how my system is responding against the physical experiment. Okay, so if my system is adequate, the system's response is adequate from the computational model as well as for the experimental model, that means my result is now validation metric I have to fix at first. So if that is adequate enough, then I can apply that computational model to the application of interest. But if it fails, if I see that whatever the computational model, the results I'm getting from the computational model and whatever I'm getting from the physical experiment, if there is a huge difference between these two, then that means my validation metric is not fulfilling. So this is not adequate. So what I have to do, I have to calibrate my computational model. I have to update my computational model once again. And also I may need to improve or add some experimental measurement to work into it again. Okay, so what I have to do, I'm just again going back to my previous state. I have to calibrate my computational model. I have to do the experiment once more time. Then again with the computational model and physical experiment, again I have to see how my system is responding. If there is after improvement, if there is no difference between the computational model and the physical experiment, then I can say that my metric, it is validating the metric, it is validating my result, expectation is fulfilled, it is adequate enough, and hence I can apply that computational model to application of interest. Okay, so that is how the computational model meets the experiment. Now, what is our tool in computational sciences? What we do, as I already mentioned, so we use mathematical algorithm, we use statistics, we use large database to integrate chemical theory and modeling with experimental observations. Okay, so what we need also, there is an advances of computer visualization, as I told already, that in experiments we sometimes we cannot see, we just see the results, what is happening, but really the bond is breaking, bond is forming, or new adduct is forming or not, that is very difficult to know other than you are visualizing. So our tool is the visualization capability, we want that. And third is the high performance computing facility. That is very, very important if you want to do the biomolecule, if you are particularly interested on the biomolecular dynamics or the physical or the properties of biomolecules or any protein drug interactions and so on. Okay, membrane dynamics, whatever you want to do, you need a large scale of supercomputing facility and computing clusters, which is known as high performance computing cluster, to solve the problems. We have to do a lot of simulations. I have not gone to the simulation part. I will tell about that later. So the very, very essential thing is the high performance computing. Obviously, algorithm also plays an important role here, because if your algorithm, if your code is failed to get a good algorithm, if it is not fast enough, you won't be able, you have a high performance computation, but your algorithm, whatever the code you have written, that is not fast enough. Okay, so give the result within the time. Then also, although you have the resources, you are not going to get the result on time. That is also very, very important. Even, I mean, we cannot basically escape from each other. So all are very important: mathematical algorithm, high speed computation, and there are several methods. Which methods you are applying for your system? Okay, so there are several methods like electronic structure method, molecular dynamic simulation, quantitative structure activity relationship, then cheminformatics, full statistical analysis, and so on. Okay, so these are the several methods. We have to choose that which problem we are talking about and which method I have to adapt. Okay. And what, as I told, the development of computer codes and algorithms. So this is very, very essential. Although you have the resources, but your code is not working, if your code is not parallelized, then although you have a resource, you cannot do anything. Okay, so it has to be very nicely MPI library you have to use here to make your code fast, and you have to unnecessary bugging also. There can be a lot of bug. Okay, that also you have to take care, and using of lot of array, all these things also you have to see. Okay, so that is the thing that here we need the help of the computational people. Okay, so develop the codes and algorithm which is suitable to solve the problem of our interest. Okay, so now this development of this computer codes and algorithm, that is also our tool, and we can work within the framework of Windows, Mac OS, and Linux environment. And obviously, if you are talking about the high performance computing cluster, then the Linux is the best environment so far. Okay, and all the codes are also developed for the Linux environment also, so one has to learn about it. Okay, so that is the main tools what we are using in the computational sciences here. So here I have shown the multi-scale hierarchy of modeling. If you just remove from the electrons here to grid, you can see here I have shown here, this is the distance scale. You can see we are starting from the angstrom to nanometer, then micron, nanometer, and then meters. Okay, and here in the x-axis you can see these are the several time scale are associated. When we are talking about the meter distance, it is of hour, then the second, microsecond, and the least is the femtosecond. So and how different methods are basically dependent on the distance and time. You can see that quantum mechanics, when we are just talking about the electrons, we can use the quantum mechanics. If we are talking about the atoms and molecules, we can consider molecular dynamics, and there is an overlap region here, that Q and MM, where this is the first principal force fields are falling in the region. And nowadays we can use both the classical molecular dynamics simulation as well as the quantum mechanics together also to get the hybrid QMMM method. Okay, so that depends that which type of problem you are going to handle. And then if you go more than that, if you are going to more than the picosecond or nanosecond, because our region is up to MD, that means when we are talking about the atoms in molecules, we are interested to see the dynamics which is falling within the nanosecond or sometime to the microsecond. So sometime to the microsecond, what I am telling because you need a very fast computing facility for this. Unless and until you cannot reach the microsecond time scale. Okay, so to get the properties in microsecond, so that requires very high computing power. So otherwise, femtosecond, picosecond, nanosecond, until MD, we can go. Then if we are talking about the domains or grids, then obviously the meter, nanometer scale we are talking about, then hour second. So being a chemist or a physicist, we are basically, our aim is to reach up to this. We are not interested to do in the meso and continuum scale. Okay. So now, let us already, since I have already defined our region, that is quantum mechanics or molecular mechanics, where we are confined ourselves within the atoms or electrons. Okay, so now I'll just brief about what is quantum mechanics and molecular mechanics. Already we know, but I will go very fast to discuss this part. These are the very important, obviously. So first is the potential energy surface. So potential energy surface, it is very important. This is the first step to make the theory more closely mimic to the experiments. Okay, so that is why we need to know what is potential energy surface says. So basically, it is nothing but it will give you this energy surface will give you the all possible structures for a given chemical formula. Okay, so what is it? It is a mathematical function that gives the energy of molecules as a function of its geometry, and it is a hypersurface which is defined by the potential energy of a collection of atoms for the odd different atomic arrangements. Okay, so if you have a 3n number of atoms in your molecule, then 3n minus 6 will be the dimension of the potential energy surface. So this surface we cannot visualize, obviously. We have to imagine this is a hypersurface, because beyond 3 dimension we cannot see anything. So whatever is there beyond 3 dimension, we have to just assume it. Okay, we have to just recognize it, that if hypersurface, it will be this type of, so you have to imagine. Okay, so your imagination power will be should be there, so that you can understand what is this hypersurface is. Okay, so just let me take an example of the small water molecules, which we have only 3 atoms, oxygen, hydrogen and 2 hydrogens. Hydrogen and 2 oxygens. So if you just change a little bit of OH distance, you will find that it is lying in the potential energy surface, it is lying in some different position. Okay, so depending upon the number of atoms, degrees of freedom, how many total possible conformational possible structures are there in the potential energy surface, we can determine. So this is basically a mathematical function which will give you the energy of a molecule as a function of its geometry. Okay, so in molecular mechanics, it provides this energy is as a function of bond stretch, bond breadth, torsion. Okay, so this only work when all these parameters are available. If we have the bond stretch parameters, if we have the bending information and torsion information, then all this stretching, bending and torsion information will provide you the energy of that particular molecule, and you can get the potential energy surface you can construct when the parameters are available. Okay, now for the quantum mechanics, it provides an energy function which can be exact in principle and works it for any molecule. Okay, so for that, several approximate quantum methods are being used for in the sake of computational expenses. Now, what are the different computational methods and algorithms are available? So first is, if you are talking about the quantum mechanics, which basically follows the Schrödinger equation. So we have different type of methods here, as we already heard it from our previous lectures also, the ab initio, semi-empirical, density functional theory, and which can deal about 10 to 100 atoms, not more than that, because here when we are talking about the quantum mechanics, we are basically dealing with the electrons. So electrons means the electron clouds are there, so it is very it is very difficult to handle the more number of atoms due to the as we are basically interested on the electrons here, so our we can take only 10 to 100 atoms, and if you are going to do some quantum simulation, you can go even not picosecond also. We have to sometimes strict within the femtosecond region. Okay, so if you are doing some ab initio quantum mechanical simulation. And next is the molecular mechanics, which is basically based on the Newton's law of motion. Okay, so that can be of two different types. One is the Monte Carlo simulation, and another is the molecular dynamic simulation. So if you are talking about the diffusion, if you are talking about the dynamics, transport properties, you need to do the molecular dynamics. So what is it, how far we can go for the molecular mechanics? That we can go to the 10 to the power 4 to 10 to the power 5 atoms. So if you have the more computation power, you can go to 30-40 lakhs or more than that, depending upon the computation power. And not only 10 to 100 nanosecond, I must go beyond it. So we can now reach till microsecond also. As I told, if you have the computational facility, you can go beyond several nanoseconds or even to the microsecond. Okay, so there is a folding lab called I forget the name. Yeah, Vijay S. Pandey. Okay, in US. So he is working on the protein folding, and he has a lot of facilities, and his simulations are always reaching the more than microsecond also. Okay, so you can just Google it out sometime. Okay, so this is the molecular mechanics. Then there exists hybrid quantum mechanics, molecular mechanics, which studies the chemical reactions in macromolecules. It basically what hybrid QM and MM says that, as I told, when we are talking about the electron, we have to consider the quantum mechanical tool. If you are interested only on atoms, then molecular mechanics is fine. And when you are talking about the dynamics of molecules, MM is fine. But sometimes it happens that my system is very large. It is a very vast biological system. And other than dynamics of that particular biomolecules, I want to see some type of kind of reaction within the some type of different type of study within the reaction path, just like reaction path or something like that, rate constant and all this within the particular large biomacromolecule. Then what I have to do, I can use both the combination of molecular mechanics and the quantum mechanics. Okay, so what I will do here, I have a big region, I have a big macromolecule, and here I will define one region as a QM and another region as a molecular mechanics. Okay, so this is nothing but hybrid. I am using the combination of both QM as well as molecular mechanics. So for which I need, if I sometime I want to see the chemical reaction in some macromolecular system, for the reaction path and so on. Okay, so we can use the semi-empirical technique also there. And other than this method, there is a QSAR, quantitative structure analysis, that is also there, which is very much useful for the clinical and medicinal aspects. Okay, so these are all about the computational methods and algorithm generally used for the computational sciences people. Obviously for the biomolecules I'm talking about. Okay, now choosing the model. So this is very, very important. No single method is there. As I told that no single method of calculation is likely to be ideal for all the applications. Okay, so you have to choose the specific model. You have to understand that what is my problem. Okay, if I have this problem, then I will adopt this model. If I have that problem, I will adopt that model. So just like a destination you are going to reach, you have a destination. Suppose I want to go to Mumbai, but there are several ways to go to Mumbai. If I can afford with the money, I can use a flight. Otherwise, I have to go to train, or sometime by driving also I can go. Okay, so there are several paths. So like that, several methods are there, but you have to find out that really which one is ideal for my system. Okay, so depending upon the that you have to choose the model. Now, obviously, the success will depend upon the which model you are choosing and how it is reproducing the experimental data. Once you have set up your model and it is a potential enough to reproduce the experimental data, then you can understand, okay, my model is a very good one. This can be a very compatible one, and everyone can use. People can use it for such type of vast system to reproduce the experimental one. Okay, so what molecular mechanics model, MM model, does, it used for the determination of geometries and conformation of stable molecules, and for which high quality experiment data are plentiful. And what does quantum chemical method do? It provides us energy data, which can be also directly compared with the experimental thermochemical data and the properties such like dipole moments, and also it may give you the information about the transition state. Okay, so these are very important. Which one to choose, MM model or QM model? Now, what type of properties we can obtain from the QM? So we can go for the charge distribution, electrostatic potential, polarizabilities, geometries, vibrational spectra, electronic excitation, photoelectron spectra, NMR shift, thermochemistry. All these we can do even within the core of the biomolecules like protein. Just you have to use the hybrid QMM in that case. Okay, then you can get all this type of calculation. It can be done. Okay, so what are the popular QM software for here are few are given here: GAMES, Spartan, Gaussian, NuChem. You must be knowing this is very, very famous one. Then Jaguar, Sci4, QChem, all these basically can do the energy optimization and so on. Okay, so these are some popular QM software. Okay, next I will switch to the molecular dynamics simulation and its applications. So as I told that the first difference between the quantum mechanics, molecular mechanics, and what is the general idea behind the molecular mechanics, because classical molecular dynamics simulation is basically based on the molecular mechanics. Okay, so just a brief I have to give it about it. So what we are doing here in the MM, we are treating the electrons, atoms are ball. So no electrons are treating here, and these atoms are bonded each other by spring. Okay, you can see here. So these are stretchable. So the atoms are stretchable.